Oh, goody.
Alright, what's going on everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So in this one, we are talking about everyone's favorite card, and totally not using any sarcasm there, for Leader. So this is a card that has been the topic of discussion for the past few days. Main reason for it being, it started kind of popping up in almost every or the majority of meta decks, and then funnily enough there was actually a new deck that was made by another streamer, Jira, and it uses Leech and it uses Leader, and it is absolutely everywhere. Deck is pretty nutty, and the whole reason that deck kind of exploded is because it really countered a lot of the other wave Leader kind of decks running around. And so it kind of became public enemy number one. And if you kind of wanted to beat these either like Death Wave She-Hulk or other wave Leader kind of decks, Leech Leader was kind of the way to do it. And it still seems to be. But now we're getting into a point where everyone is playing this Leech Leader deck. And Leader is an interesting card because he is one of those cards in card games that people are going to have a lot of feelings about this card, and the way the card works plays into this because Leader, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Theotar in Hearthstone, whereas the feels experience of this card, when you see Leader played, most of the time someone's playing a Leader, it's because they're pretty confident they can beat you with it. And losing to your own cards, which is essentially what this is doing, it's playing your own cards, it's not an experience people usually find super enjoyable. I think, you know, if we were to make a little scale about losing to an opponent's cards versus losing to your own cards, I think the salt meter would be much higher on losing to your own cards. It's just something people generally do not like. And so that begs the question, does Leader need to be nerfed? And there have been a lot of people calling for Leader to be nerfed, whether it be on Twitter, YouTube, other forms of streaming, social media, all that stuff. There are a lot of people who really fucking hate this card. And I'm not really one of them. I find Leader to be kind of annoying sometimes, but he's a card that I think kind of a necessary evil for the game to keep some other strategies in check. However, that being said, that doesn't mean I think he needs to stay how he is in his current form. Because personally, I think this card is in need of a bit of tweaking. And part of the reason I think that this card needs to be changed is because of the card acquisition philosophy of Marvel Snap. So typically, in Snap, what I would tell people to do if they're sick of losing to Leader is play a deck that Leader doesn't like beat on turn 6. If you do that, you're going to have a much less bad time versus all these Leader decks, right? Seems simple enough. The problem is Leader is really, really good against a lot of the decks that are easier to obtain, as well as just some of the top decks in the game. But that's not really, I think, the reason he's an issue. I think it's like a two-parted issue where card acquisition, people aren't able to have all the cards that they want. A lot of players are launch players, and they're working their way through Pool 3. You know, they're in that somewhere between 1 and 2,000 collection level, and they've still got a ways to go before they have access to all the Pool 3 cards. And it's incredibly frustrating to be running into these Leader decks where people tell you, well, you just shouldn't play into Leader, or you should play a deck that doesn't lose to Leader, when not everyone has cards that are really good against Leader. And I think a big example of this is one of the popular decks that people play going from Pool 2 to Pool 3 in Devil Dinosaur. Devil Dino generally kind of has a problem losing to Leader. I think it's one of the worst decks that really doesn't appreciate playing into a Leader on turn 6. And there are a kind of limited number of ways for you to play around it. And when that's one of the most popular decks that people transition from Pool 2 to Pool 3 in, when they don't have many other Pool 3 cards to make kind of a successful Pool 3 deck or an optimized Pool 3 deck, then the leader problem gets even more annoying because you kind of feel helpless. You feel like, well, they had this card and I don't have this card, and there's nothing in my collection I can use to reasonably counter it. And then that leads to just more frustration because it feels like there's no agency. There's no, I'm not making like a decision here a lot of the time. And that's a really bad feeling. It makes players feel helpless, and that's an easy way to make people stop playing the game. So I think that's a big part of the issue. Like, for example, I was playing it was a Shuri Red Skull big power kind of deck. And I did really well with that deck. I actually used it most of the way to climb to Infinite. We're going to be finishing the Infinite climb on tonight's stream, so feel free to stop by for that. But it was doing really, really well for me against all of these leader decks. And so I was like, oh, great, this is exciting. You know, we found a deck that gets around the turn 6 leader with things like Taskmaster, where Taskmaster, yeah, they'll copy your Taskmaster, but then the Taskmaster will read their leader and go to 4 power and you win. And that happened a lot. There are other ways you can win through it too, but that was kind of the big primary counter for leader from what I was playing at the time. And it was working out pretty great. And so I was like, oh, this is great. You know, we found a counter to leader. Now just need to share this, let people know, and then they can stop, you know, losing to leader and being frustrated. Except that list uses multiple pool 3 cards and, more importantly, a pool 5 card that people are probably not going to get access to for who knows how long. By the time people get access to that card, leader might not even be relevant. So it's I think this is a card in particular that really stands out and makes you feel like you don't have agency when you are still in that building your collection of pool 3 cards kind of phase. Now, don't get me wrong, it can still be really fucking annoying when you have a full pool 3 collection. I still lose to leader, and I find it frustrating sometimes. So I have some ideas for how I think this card should be changed, because I don't think it should not exist. I think leader is kind of an important thing to have. I think it's just a bit overtuned right now, and I think it would probably be good for the health of the game and the player base for them to make some relatively minor but impactful changes to this card. So there are 2 main things I would change with leader. Now, the first one is its power. 4 is just too much. For leader to work how the card is intended to work, it needs some power, at least to my understanding. And I've seen other people talk about this as well. Some people are like, oh, put him to 0 power, put him to -1 power. I think those are some really, really two-head takes. I think the card will never see play again if you put him to 0 power, and I don't want to delete cards. I think deleting cards is kind of stupid and kind of childish. I hate when card games just delete cards, especially in a game where it's a smaller number of cards. So having one less option that's like a good card to put into a deck, it just makes the deck building experience worse. So I'm definitely in favor of making cards still very playable, just not quite as powerful. Kind of like what they did in the most recent update. Honestly, I think their balance changes were pretty good. Destroyer still sees a lot of play, still a good card. Angela, same thing. Mysterio, pretty much the same thing. Don't see as much of him because the meta has shifted a little bit away from him, but I don't think he's a bad card at 4 power versus 5. So that's kind of what I think needs to be done to leader here. I think we take a little bit off the top of leader. I think you put him down to 3. I think you make him 1 power less, but I don't think that should be the only change to leader. The other change, and honestly, maybe this is enough of a change where you could leave him at 4, but I think putting him to 3 is probably safer. You don't have to go back and mess with it again, at least anytime soon. Leader should not copy the stats of the cards you play. I think that's the biggest kind of bullshit thing about this card, is how they can play your own cards and get more stats from it if they go second sometimes. That is really fucking ridiculous. I just don't know any other way to say it. I think it's silly. I think that leader should serve a purpose in trying to counter like people playing 1 or 2 really big cards on the final turn. But when leader is winning games because he's copying your 3 drops and your surfer, after you have played those cards already. So not only do those cards get the buffs they got from your surfer, but then they get the buffs again from the surfer that got copied. That's really fucking stupid. I don't agree with that. I think that is kind of the bigger problem with this card, is that it should just copy the base form of the card. It shouldn't copy any of these other stat alterations. I think that's what's kind of making it too strong and making it counter stuff that I don't think it was initially made to counter. I think leader is like clearly oh, you're gonna play a big thing? Well, I'm gonna play your big thing and 4 power. And I think that's fine. I think that's an okay thing to have in the game because it's counterable. When leader starts countering your kind of mid-range decks, your combo decks, when it starts countering like more things than it was initially supposed to, then I think there's obviously a problem and we should probably make some changes to the card. So those are my thoughts on leader. I know definitely a controversial card right now, but I think a lot of people are in the same boat about it. It's just different levels of how much it should be changed. And this is kind of where I stand. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this card, if there's a way you would like to see it changed. Marvel Snap patches usually happen towards the end of the month, like a week or week and a half or something before the new season goes live. I don't know if the holidays are going to change that. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. We will see. But I would not be surprised to see this card getting some adjustments in the next balance patch. So those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this card. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Goody.